And it was so fun because Steve rigged it and gave me essentially a video game controller just with all these buttons on it. And so I could sit at the monitor and trigger all these lights, and I started mashing buttons and then realized certain combos could do certain things. And hello, I'm Rian Johnson. This is The Process, and I'm here with my cinematographer and longtime friend, Steve Yedlin. Say hi, Steve.
Hi.
Hi, Steve was what you should have said.
Hi, Steve. I'm
That's
sorry.
it.
Hi, Steve. I'm not good at following directions.
So we just made a movie called Wake Up Dead Man, and we're here to talk about it.
You're the only one on stage with the Monsignor at the time of his killing. And you're the only one at that church who hated his guts.
The spirit really moved him today, huh?
So tell me, what the hell happened?
What was the thing that was, for you, the biggest difference, the biggest new thing that we did with this movie? I mean, the movie has like a different tone and palette. It's kind of a little more Gothic and moody in its tone, so that defined a lot. But from your perspective, what was kind of the biggest thing that was different about this one?
I think the biggest one was just, since you said early on this idea of the light changing a lot, where we feel the clouds coming in front of the sun and all these different changes within scenes. So we did a lot of work with both with the art department and with Dave Smith, the gaffer, to tee all that up in prep so that we could do it. We could be agile with it when we were shooting, because there was a lot of, there were a lot of ones that were exactly planned that you'd either told me in prep, or some of it's even in the script where we know exactly it's this one.
And just to kind of set the table for people, so there's a lot of scenes in the movie that take place, it's a murder mystery movie. It takes place in and around a church, mainly a Catholic church in kind of upstate New York. We shot it in London, and we did a lot of the work on a set, a beautiful set that Rick Heinrich built that was the interior of the church. And one of the things that I talked to Steve about at the beginning was the notion that, because I grew up in Colorado where the clouds move very fast, and you would get lots of times you'd be having a conversation in the living room with your family, and suddenly it would be like God turned the lights out and just things go from very sunny to very dark. And the notion of getting very theatrical with those kind of natural light shifts that you don't see very often in movies. That's what we're talking about. That was kind of one of the first conversations Steve and I had
in prep, making sure that it was all teed up so that we could, on the day, just be creative with it, and it had all the agility to adjust to taste, adjust to what the actors were doing as needed. But then on the one hand, it wasn't a laborious technical process, but on the other hand, once we got what we liked, it was repeatable.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean, Steve, you had done so much work in prep, basically, to rig the lighting kind of like all around the set, because it was a 360 set. It was like a fully 4-wall contained set. It was the entire church. We had kind of picked a side because we didn't have the space to build on both sides, so we kind of picked a side the light would favor from. But then once we did that, Steve you did a ton of prep to kind of, and Dave Smith, you guys did a ton of prep to pre-rig it. But not only that, to set up the light control system. For me, it was incredible because Steve has his station with his computer that he controls the whole thing from. And it really was, it was to the point where we could play God. It was almost like playing music. He could dial it in. Okay, well, then what if the color temperature goes darker, goes like cooler when it gets darker in this point? And I don't know, it was incredibly fun. But I know it was a ton of work on your part in terms of setting it all up for that.
Yeah, no, yeah, it was absolutely a lot in prep. Both the physical rigging of it and the control side. Yeah, it was amazing to get to do it, because it kind of is the promise of, you hear that phrase painting with light, and it's sort of actually doing it in you know, in a very reactive way that, what kind of wouldn't have been possible in the past, really, where, you know, the way things used to be with, you can't even change stuff without, dropping scrims and gels and all that. You got to get up on all, if things are rigged, you either got to get up in the perms or, lower the lights down to get to them. And this, the ability to just, do it to feel, to feel and really seeing the changes instantly, and being able to finesse tiny bits even right up to when we're rolling, because we can call ready and then still be finessing tiny little things because there's no invasiveness to it. There's nobody tinkering with anything,
The other fun thing was there's a couple sequences. There's one in particular that's kind of a little bit of a freak out sequence where I wanted to use strobe lights and do kind of like a David Lynch type Black Lodge sort of dream effect with a bunch of different strobe lights going off kind of in different sequences to create a nightmare vibe. And it was so fun because Steve rigged it and gave me essentially a video game controller just with all these buttons on it. And so I could sit at the monitor and trigger all these lights, and I'd start mashing buttons and then realize certain combos could do certain things. And I mean, this new kind of era of remote light control has just, it's kind of lighting technology in general has been, as much as digital technology with cameras or with editing, it's been a revolution in kind of the way that movies are made.
We were able to have like the entire soft box that was over the whole the whole church set, because we had a series of soft boxes that were over the top. That's what was in those was just cheap LED ribbon, just like generic LED ribbon, not movie lights. Because of our custom software that we're using, we were able to make that any color and still match all the other lights too, and still have the exact color control over them, as though basically making dumb lights into smart lights, which was a combination of that. We could actually make those soft boxes that size and everything, and also just leave them in there because that set had to stand for the entire movie. And if it had been renting movie lights for that entire period, that would have been an incredible cost, but it was just cheap LED ribbon in there.
The way that, I don't know, it's interesting to me because we obviously have a way that we work in terms of the shots and the shot design and kind of how we work on set. That's just kind of how we've figured out how to do it. It's weird because I think as a director, the one thing I never get to see is other directors working. I never get to see, and I know the way we do it is not the usual way, but there is no usual way really. But just to talk through kind of what we, and maybe do you want to just talk through kind of from, I start doing kind of my chicken scratch storyboards, and then during prep, we sit down and go through them.
Why we're able to hone in so well, I think, is because, because you really do know what you want in advance. We can focus everything in on that and making the best version of that. There isn't sort of a spiraling or it's not like, there's not like a whole negotiation where I'm, pitching you different ideas and you don't, you haven't decided what you want or something like that. Which is something that, because there are so many different working styles, there are productions that work that way, and just that sort of confidence in knowing what we're aiming at and being able to put all of the resources into that rather than there sort of being a long indecision period and then rushed at the end when the indecision is finished. We kind of get the whole prep time to really make it, to really focus in.
I love when we show up on set and, I'll typically just do like a little blocking rehearsal first with the actors where I'll walk through kind of my initial thoughts, and then sometimes it'll change, sometimes it won't. But then we put down marks of where the blocking ends up landing, and then the actors go put their faces on, and then you and I start talking about how we actually attack it. And that's one of my favorite parts, because no matter how much we've I've storyboarded the whole thing out. Things have changed, things have shifted, the real space and and that's where there's a collaboration in terms of, okay, here was a general idea. Oh, but what if we did this? What if we did that? I don't know. I love that part of the process.
Yeah, no, me too. And I think the more it's sort of performance-based scenes with, especially when it's a lot of cast, is the ones where we're more figuring it out, where your shot list is more of a general guide, and then we're figuring it out. Whereas, if you have more of an action scene, with one person, that's much more where your shot list is exactly what it's going to be, rather than the kind of general direction.
One thing that we've been doing forever that I just assumed was the way it was always done is I'll lens up a shot and kind of figure it out exactly, and then and then the camera assistant will mark under me where it is and take a height for it, and then set the camera there. That's pretty standard practice, right? That's kind of how it's done. Yeah.
That's the traditional way to do it. So, I mean, it actually is traditional, but I think a lot of people have gotten away from it, where I mean, again, there's a million styles, of working styles, not just visual styles. But I think there are a lot of projects where, people are hunting for things a little bit more, where they sit, it's more like the camera gets set up and then they find the shot with the setup camera, rather than first finding the shot and putting the camera there. But absolutely, though, it's a tradition. The way we do it is a traditional way to do it, even if it's not the ubiquitous.
We use Steadicam on this movie a little bit more than we usually use it, but it was always for practical reasons. I feel like Steadicam is something generally, almost as a style thing, you and I have kind of avoided over the years.
Yeah, I feel like if you first design the shot and then figure out how to do it, rather than the other way around, you're almost never going to land at Steadicam. And to me, it's just there's no need, like it. There's that floatiness to it that I think is kind of distracting, and when you have a strong dolly move, like a push in, when it stops, it really stops, and the stop is as important as the move. And Steadicam, and there's great Steadicam operators that can, depending on what the shot is, they can almost make it look like a dolly. But the thing is, if you don't need to do that, then why? Even if you have the absolute best Steadicam operator, why? Because you're also forcing a human to carry a very heavy thing, and it's not good for their back. And why do it when you don't need to?
Yeah, which, I mean, for me, I feel like of all the people around the camera, the person that I form, like, besides the operator, obviously, the person that I form the tightest relationship is always the dolly grip. And dolly grip, in a way, is it's a form of dancing. It's a form of, I remember on Star Wars, Gary Himes, who was he had like musical notes embossed on his equipment, and he was a musician. Was he a dancer or a musician? I forget.
I don't remember.
Yeah, it's musical Gary, but he would. But there's that element of kind of like music to how you do a dolly move and how you dial it in, and that's one kind of collaborative relationship that doesn't get talked about a lot.
Yeah, no, that's the dolly grip is an important filmmaker position. It's not like an interchangeable cog in the machine. But yeah, I mean, that's the other thing I think with when it's dolly instead of Steadicam and all that, the amount of intentionality that can be in the specific shot design, like exactly how a push in feels, like whether it feels like intensifying versus swelling versus whatever, it really matters. The exact speed of it depends on the gestures of the actors and the angle of view of the lens that you're on, and all of these things. And there's a lot of times where and we can really finesse that. I think there's been a lot of times too, because you and I have the same kind of taste and sense of that stuff, where like I'll say, should we just slow it down a tiny bit, that push? And you're like, I was going to say that. We both have that same sense of it. I
feel like this is the most lighting movie of of the three, definitely. I
Yeah,
don't know. Would you agree?
absolutely.
Yeah, which was fun for me to watch because I feel like you dove. I mean, just the feeling of kind of the shadowy feeling inside the church and sort of the moodiness of it and the degree to which we really went for tone communicated through lighting. I don't know, man. I feel like your work just, yeah.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it was so much fun to it got to be so expressive with the lighting, and I feel like we really were pushing that thing. I know you've always used that term, theatrical realism, but like that idea on the one hand of it being, I mean, what we're trying to do anyway is on the one hand feeling really big and theatrical. It's not like, you know, it's not like some tiny subtle thing. I mean, you're seeing the light shifts where it's really big, but on the other hand, it's not theatrical in a sort of like fake, just looks like a movie light way. We're trying to be evocative of the actual, the time of day and the whether it's weather or we have so many different things in that church with not just the sun coming over the clouds, but we have day, night, dusk, dawn. We have the different versions where like first it's dawn, but then it's the after dawn when the orange sun is streaming in, and it was also really cool just because all three of the movies have that one place that we land into for a lot of pages of work. And this was the one where we got to make it look so many different ways, like on Glass Onion, like with the atrium, except for when the lights go out and the lighthouse is sweeping over, it's supposed to nothing is supposed to have changed in there, so we had to, the variation that we were getting had to kind of be snuck in there.
Right. Well, no, also I feel like with Glass Onion, there was a lot more of like, 10 characters meandering around. And so by necessity, it had to be a little bit more of lighting the space. I know you did specific lighting for the setups, but we kind of had to come up with an approach to it that was, a little bit more kind of, they could kind of be anywhere and the light would work. Whereas in the church, it was a little bit more specific and we could get, because of that, a little bit more directional and moody with it, I guess.
I actually don't remember because one of the ones that in the final movie is so pointed, but it wasn't as planned out in advance as like the Damascus moment and stuff is the first time Blanc and Judd talk, and they each have their speech about their view on faith, and that the sun coming out behind Judd during his speech, like that one was, that one came out so pointed, but it was a little more found as I remember it on the like.
That's funny because I storyboarded that shot and with the sun specifically behind him.
Oh,
that
was it? Okay.
That was, as I would actually point to that as the most kind of I had in my head, and the sun breaks behind him through it of all of them. Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
I forgot that.
Yeah. No, that was that. If anything, I feel like that was the one where I think if I look on the boards, I had like a little burst cone,
wow, okay.
3 lines indicating the sun.
Okay, I didn't remember that because.
Yeah. But Steve, this was that's good talking to you, my friends.
Yeah, you too, man.
All right, this has been The Process.